Okay, now we'll go to the Photoshop scene, and I already put a background and I already put a title on there. So the next thing that we need to do is do thumbnails. So I created a layer called thumbnails, and what thumbnails are is small versions of big pictures, and also they're going to serve as buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use File, Import to Library, and I'm going to import one of the projects that I'm going to use as a thumbnail. So let's just use example. So in my library, I'm going to find example, and I'm going to drag it down, and I'm going to go to properties and shrink it and shrink it and shrink it until it's little. Okay, so now it's a small preview of a big thing. So now that it's a small preview of a big thing, I can right click and go to convert to symbol, and I'm going to name it B acrostic, because this project was called the acrostic poem, and we're going to have to create a new scene to make the big version of it. So that's why I'm naming it that. Make sure it's a button and click OK. So we need to create a new scene, and we're going to call it acrostic. In this acrostic scene, we're going to put a big version of, we're going to use the big version of this example, and again we're going to have to shrink it until it fits on the stage. And I'm going to use my align panels to center it, and this is going to be my project layer because this is the full screen of the project. Then I'm going to create a new layer for background so that we can make it pretty, and I'm going to just get a new rectangle, and I'm going to draw a rectangle here, and so now I have a background with my acrostic poem. So we need to do two things with this. I'm going to fit in window so that you can see everything. We need to have two buttons on this acrostic page. We need to have one that goes to Photoshop and one that goes to choices. Remember that we already have a button for choices. So I'm going to go back here to choices, and that's my button to go back to choices. We also have a button to go back to Photoshop. So I'm going to put that button over here. Now this one in this particular scene is big, so I'm just going to shrink it so that it doesn't cover anything up. So I just shrunk that Photoshop button, and now it's over here in the corner, and now we just need to program them. Although the one thing I didn't do is put them in your own layer. So I'm going to cut these out and put them in their own layer, and this layer will be called buttons. So now these buttons are in their own layer, and I can right click on them one at a time, and they're already symbols, they're already buttons, so I just have to program it. This one's going to go to the choices scene, and this one is going to go to Photoshop scene. Now in this acrostic scene we need to stop action, so create a stop layer and insert a stop action, and that way it should work. And now let's test it out. But before we test it out, we need to go back to the Photoshop scene and add a stop action there also. So create a new layer, name it stop, and then input a stop. Now what we also need to do on this Photoshop scene is make this programmed to go to acrostic. We couldn't do it earlier because we didn't have an acrostic scene. Now we do, so we can make sure this says be acrostic, it's telling us where to go, and then go to, and then change this to acrostic. And now let's test it out. And we'll go to the red button, Photoshop, acrostic, and here's our acrostic poem, full screen. Yay, yes. And this will take us back to Photoshop, and this will take us back to choices. So good job.